Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Awesome. Good. You guys survived spring break. Are you rested or not rested? Just more stressed? Much needed break. Good. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we are gonna get going. So here is the link to Poll Everywhere. And so I'll go ahead and pull up our first set of questions, just an intro, get us kind of back on track. So there we go. All right, so how are we feeling about classes now that we have had a little bit of a break? Or hopefully had a little bit of a break. Everything's steady, good. 10 o'clock on a Monday, that's good. Good. Better, but still stressed. I feel you. I feel you. Just trying to pull through. I also feel that my grading is, I would like to be further along in grading than I am. So I'm pretty sure that this class is a part of that. So please just be patient. I'm working on a lot of that this week. Oh no, somebody is worse than before spring break. Oh man. All right. Okay, good. A little bit better because of break. Stressed, but ready to finish out the semester. Good. Ready for summer. Yep. Well, I don't know, if you're in Northern California, I think this week, after we get through today, is supposed to be pretty spring-like. So, but I don't know. It's kind of trying to snow on us up here in the very north part of the state. So awesome. Well rested. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for participating with that. Yep, it is definitely crunch time. So I'm sure every class is in a steep part of their learning curve right now. I know in repro we are for sure. So, all right, well, thank you guys for those responses. Let's roll to this next question here. So prior to spring break, we were in chapter 6, which was talking about puberty. And the female side of puberty is a lot more complex than the male side of puberty. So I just want to get an idea of how you guys are feeling about your comprehension of puberty or chapter 6 material. All right, we'll just give it another 30 seconds for everybody to get their answers in here. I think we're pretty close. All right, well, for the most part, it sounds like you guys have a good handle on chapter 6 material, which is great. That's actually really encouraging because chapter 6 is really the first chapter that we bring all of those independent foundational chapters together. So we're coupling anatomy with physiology and with hormones and with embryology. And so all those things start to come together. And so chapter 6 can feel a little bit overwhelming. And so what I would like to do now is to just kind of go through some questions about chapter 6 using Poll Everywhere. And then I want to go back through and just reflect or review a couple of key components and open the floor up for any questions that you may have. All right, so let's go ahead and move to our next question here. So which hormone defeminizes the hypothalamus during the embryogenesis process? So as that embryo is forming, which hormone defeminizes the hypothalamus? So we'll give you about 30 more seconds here. Okay, 10 more seconds. All right. So we'll go ahead and lock our responses in. Awesome. So testosterone is the hormone that defeminizes the hypothalamus. And so I would just want to kind of reiterate what is going on here. So let me switch to the PowerPoint. All right, so with the fetal gonads, and so the either the ovary tissue or the testes tissue in females and males respectively, those are going to start producing the gonadal hormones. So estrogen or testosterone is what they're going to be producing. And so in a female embryo, the fetal ovary is going to be producing estradiol, and estradiol is going to feed back through the circulation system to the brain, and it's actually going to be bound by alpha fetoprotein. And so alpha fetoprotein is going to be the protein that binds estradiol and doesn't allow estrogen to cross the blood-brain barrier. Okay, so in the female, that surge center stays protected and it stays developed. Okay, so keep in mind, if we think back to chapter 4, which was all about embryology, and the presence or absence of the SRY gene on the Y chromosome will determine if that embryo is going to be male or female, as long as there's no like mutations and all that good stuff. So if SRY gene is present, then SRY protein will be produced, and that will lead to the development of the male embryo. However, in the absence of SRY protein, we get development of the female. And so once the female embryo has been developed, those fetal ovaries are going to start producing estradiol, and estradiol is then going to feed into the circulatory system and is going to be bound by alpha fetoprotein, and estradiol will not be allowed to cross the blood-brain barrier. The opposite of that in the males is where we actually see testosterone being produced from the testes, the fetal testes, and testosterone is not going to be bound by alpha fetoprotein. So what ends up happening is testosterone crosses the blood-brain barrier, Aromatase will then convert testosterone to estradiol, and that will neutralize or defeminize the surge center of the hypothalamus. So down here, that surge center becomes defeminized. And so that's where we see the development of the male hypothalamus or the male brain compared to the female brain. So back to our question, which hormone defeminizes hypothalamus during embryogenesis, the answer here is testosterone. So even though it gets converted to estradiol, testosterone actually has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier, whereas estradiol does not. So how are we feeling about that concept? Just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or go ahead and speak up if this is resonating with you, you feel like you have a good understanding of it. And if not, please ask questions. Okay, cool. All right.
Hey, Casey.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I don't know if anyone else found that question tricky on the quiz, but I was thinking that estrogen specifically defeminized the hypothalamus, but then the testosterone was like before that step, kind of. So out of that question, I was like, I don't know if anyone else.
I may need to work on rewording that question then, to be more specific to like which hormone crosses the blood-brain barrier and can cause defeminization. That might be a little bit more clear than just what hormone causes defeminization. So, but it's the whole process of testosterone being able to cross the blood-brain barrier, but estradiol not. And then that conversion process will neutralize that, the surge center. So, okay, I'll make a note. I may need to, I'll go back in and look at that question. Okay, cool. All right. Let's roll back to poll everywhere. All right, so our next question for you guys, multiple answers here. So during a female's transition into puberty, what happens? So you've got 4 choices here, and read them carefully. So A is the number of estrogen receptors on the tonic center decrease. B, the number of estrogen receptors on the tonic center increases. C, the number of estradiol receptors on the surge center increases. And D, the number of estradiol receptors on the surge center decrease. So we'll give you a minute here. All right, about 30 seconds left. All right, go ahead and get those last selections in. Go ahead and lock these answers in. All right, so our 2 correct answers here were during a female transitioning through the pubertal process, the number of estradiol receptors on the tonic center are going to decrease, okay? In addition to that, the number of estradiol receptors on the surge center are going to increase. So that transition process is governed by a lot of different things, which we're going to talk more in depth about here in just a few minutes. But when it comes down to the physiology of puberty, this is what is happening, is that in the female, in the hypothalamus, she basically has two areas of the brain. There are two areas of the hypothalamus that are going to produce GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone. Okay, so the tonic center is going to be the center that consistently puts out GnRH. So it's kind of like that drip, 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 drip system. Okay, the surge center only occurs in the female. Okay, and that surge center is going to be, when it gets turned on, is equivalent to like a flood. Okay, so the system is going to flood with GnRH production. And so to get to that point, receptors, estradiol receptors are the key piece of the puzzle here. So in the surge center and in the tonic center, we have estradiol receptors that are continually being produced or degraded. Okay, so keep in mind these receptors are going to be protein based. Estradiol is a steroid, so we're going to see that steroid work in a fast action and in a slow action, depending on the tissue. And so with the tonic center, I'm just going to switch back over to the PowerPoint here. With the tonic center that has that consistent drip, 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 drip of GnRH, what we will see in that transitioning process is the number of receptors for estradiol. And keep in mind, estradiol is coming from the female gonad back up to the hypothalamus. The receptors on that tonic center are going to start to decrease. At the same time, the number of receptors on the surge center are increasing, making the surge center more receptive and more affected by the estradiol that is in the system. And that is going to lead to that first pre-ovulatory LH surge. And so what we end up seeing is that receptors are going to be the key regulator here of this pubertal process. And so with receptors, we have only a few estradiol receptors on the tonic center total. Okay, and so those receptors on the tonic center are going to allow an increase in blood estradiol, okay, without further decreasing GnRH. So because there's only a few receptors on the tonic center, it doesn't work as a very good regulator for the pubertal process. But the potential is in the receptors on the surge center. And so the way that we get more receptors in the surge center for estradiol is by decreasing the sensitivity of the tonic center to estradiol, and that will in turn increase the GnRH pulse frequency in the surge center. And so females that are early in the pubertal process, they really only have about 4 pulses of GnRH released per day. However, females that have gone through the pubertal process have 16 to 24 pulses of GnRH per day. So that pulsativity is really what's changing during the pubertal process. So the key to the transition of puberty in the female is that the tonic center is less sensitive to estradiol. Okay, that desensitivity in turn increases GnRH frequency, okay, from the surge center. And that increase in surge center GnRH is then going to cause a downstream effect where we see an increase in LH and FSH from the anterior pituitary gland. Those hormones are going to travel to the gonad, and they're going to increase follicular growth. So they increase the growth of the follicle on the ovary. And the bigger the follicle, the more estradiol that's going to be produced from that follicle. And so the more estradiol that's produced, the more that gets back into the blood system to go back up to the hypothalamus. And so the receptor sensitivity here between the tonic center and the surge center is going to be the key regulatory process that defines puberty in the female. All right, so during transition, the number of estradiol receptors on the tonic center are going to decrease, and that's going to trigger the number of estradiol receptors on the surge center to increase. And that is what leads us into the pubertal process. All right, so that concept can be a little bit hard to understand. So I would like to know, how are you guys feeling about that concept? I'm hoping the explanation helped a little bit, but if not, please feel free to ask questions. So you can just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether you've got this concept or not. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and head back to our next question on Poll Everywhere. All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the last question for today. So what factors can affect the onset of puberty here? And this is more than one response, so you guys can select more if you need. So we'll give you a minute here. All right, about 15 more seconds here, guys. Hey, Julie, are you in a place where you can talk to me?
Yeah, I'm in the office.
Okay, cool. Hey, I'm gonna, after we get done answering this question here, I just want to kind of talk about what's going on at the beef unit with the heifers, because that really fits into this puberty talk, okay?
Okay.
Awesome. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get those last answers in. Go ahead and lock them in. All right, so the answer here is all of this stuff. So it was a really kind of broad question. So the degree of fatness absolutely affects if puberty will take place or not. So this is actually one thing that we personally have fought in our operation for the last couple of years, because we've had kind of lower drought issues. And so as we weaned those heifers, we didn't supplement them enough. So they were a little bit smaller than what they needed to be when we started the breeding season. And so a lot of those heifers didn't even come into puberty until about a month later than what they should have. And so the degree of fatness absolutely plays a big effect on when those females come into puberty. So fat actually is an endocrine tissue. So fat produces leptin, and the hypothalamus is going to be looking for the proper degree of leptin to be present in the blood system before puberty can take place. And so that is one degree of fatness, or that's one effect that can alter puberty timing. Another effect, which is different than fatness, is actually the plane of nutrition. And so you can think of this as the quality of feed that these animals are on. And so the plane of nutrition becomes really important, because we see this a little bit more frequently in males than we do in females, specifically with bulls. And so there's a lot of producers that go to bull sales and to purchase bulls in the early spring, like Red Bluff Bull Sale, Klamath. There's a series of bull sales in Nevada, etc. And one of the things that can actually alter the fertility of yearling bulls that are sold in those bull sales is that they were fed to be pretty fat at the time of sale, because fatter animals look better and sell a little bit better, which is weird. But to get them home and to be turned out on range, they are no longer being hand fed like a grain ration or a hay ration. They're actually having to go out and search and graze for their feed. And so their plane of nutrition, the quality of the feed that they're on, decreases significantly in commercial operations. And so the body can actually register that as shock, and there's not enough nutrients to suffice the needs of the animal, and the first thing to go is reproduction. And so I've seen yearling bulls that have been pretty fat be turned out on nothing with cows and expected to breed, and they'll breed for like the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then their body goes through a shock system, and the testes just stop producing viable sperm, because reproduction is the first thing to go. So managing plane of nutrition becomes really important during the breeding season. And plane of nutrition can be really important relative to puberty, because it can actually stall or extend puberty if the quality of feed these animals are on isn't to a fairly high degree. Photoperiod, seasonality can absolutely affect puberty as well. We see this a lot in our ovine species, so especially black-faced sheep. So black-faced ewes that are fall born are going to come into puberty that following spring at 5 or 6 months of age. However, black-faced ewes that are born during the spring sorry, I said that wrong. Sorry, fall lambs that are born, fall born ewe lambs won't come into puberty in the spring, because they are short day breeders and not long day breeders. But spring born lambs that will come into puberty that following fall will go into puberty because of that photoperiod effect. So there's shorter days in the fall, so that enables them to come into puberty. And so sorry if that was a little bit confusing. So there can be either 6 months from the time an animal is born until they come into puberty, or it can be up to 12 months in the ovine species. So photoperiod absolutely can play an effect here. And then the presence of a male can also drive how fast animals come into puberty as well. And we see this more often in the swine species than in other species. And so I talked through a little bit of that in the lecture as well. The presence of a male versus not having one present can bring animals into puberty a little bit quicker. All right, so how are we feeling about all the different things that can affect puberty, onset of puberty? You guys feel like you got a good handle on that? Okay, cool. Puberty is complex. It's one of the reasons that it's one of the pieces of physiology that I enjoy the most, is because there's so much that can affect it. So yeah, so puberty is kind of a cool place to start the cyclicity discussions. All right, so before we jump into talking about the beef unit heifers, does anybody have any questions about puberty, chapter 6 in general, the lecture, the video lectures, etc.? All right, so seeing none. So Julie, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on at the beef unit right now, and how, just talk to us a little bit about the beef unit and particularly the heifers that you guys have been synchronizing, and what you did to them and what you are observing now.
Okay, so oh yeah, sorry, I thought I was on mute for a second.
Yeah, you're good.
So right now we just pulled, we try to calve our heifers like a month before we calve our cows out, just because heifers generally tend to have a little more problems. So we just want to make sure our sole focus is on them. So with that, we do kind of an extended synchronizing cycle. So we put CEDARs in what day did we put them in? We just pulled CEDARs on the 19th, which was Friday, and we put them in on the 5th. So they were in for what is that? 5th to the 9th.
14 days. Right?
Yeah, they were in for 14 days. And we just pulled CEDARs on Friday, so we chalked them, and right now we're currently just watching them to see who's cycling and who's not. And then we will give them a shot of lute on April 4th, and that will start bringing them into heat, and we'll start breeding we'll like heat watch them through that time period, from the 4th to the 8th, and we generally should see like heats and be breeding on the 6th through the 8th, April 6th through the 8th. So we do like an extended breeding or sync cycle on them because they're younger, and as Casey was talking, sometimes puberty can have an effect on when they come in. And so those are the CEDARs.
Yep.
That we use.
So this is an applicator. The green thing is an applicator. And then the white T-looking structure here is kind of a poly plastic. And so what ends up occurring is that this polyplastic piece is actually coated in synthetic progesterone. And so progesterone, again, is produced naturally in the female system by the corpus luteum that'll be on the ovary. And it's what we call the pregnancy hormone. And so the progesterone will feed back from the CL on the ovary to the uterus, and it will calm the uterus, it will prepare the uterus to attach an embryo, etc. And so these CEDARs will be folded up. They have these little wing things here. You fold them up, you put this in the applicator, and then you actually insert it into the vaginal tissue of the female, and it sets in the vagina for about 14 days and will slowly release progesterone into the blood circulation system. And so from an endocrine standpoint, what this does is it fools the brain into thinking that the uterus is preparing for a pregnancy. And so you can see almost immediately when you insert the CEDARs on a blood panel, if you were pulling blood samples at the same time, progesterone is almost immediately dumped into the system. And so this progesterone will stay in the system for 14 days. And then when Julie said that they pulled the CEDAR after 14 days, they just went through, grabbed onto these blue strings here and pulled them out. And that removed that progesterone block that was kind of falsely in the animal system. And so you guys did that, sorry, remind me, last week, right?
Yeah, we pulled them on Friday, and then we've been heat watching them all weekend.
Yep. So
just to see who's cycling.
Exactly. So the premise here is that once you remove that CEDAR, that progesterone is gone, right? And so if the progesterone levels are really, really low, that enables what hormone to be present again in a large quantity. So if we're observing heats, what hormone is going to be dominant in the system for that animal to show a standing heat? And anybody can jump in now. It's not just to Julie. So what hormone is going to enable a female to be in a standing heat? there's chats coming in. I can't see them. Nope, no chat. Okay, Julie, sorry, you get to answer the question. So what hormone is going to allow that female to be in a standing heat?
Isn't it the PGF2 alpha?
So that not quite yet, but estradiol, right?
Oh yeah,
So,
estrogen.
yeah. So when estrogen is high in the system, that female is seeking out a male. She's writing. She's looking for somebody to breed her, right? And she will stand for a heat. And so once you remove progesterone, when we pulled the cedar, that ovary was also building a new follicle. And so once the progesterone has been removed, the amount of progesterone in the system is going to decrease rapidly, allowing estradiol to be the dominant hormone in the system now. And so over the last few days, the Beef Unit crew has been heat watching, right? And so why is it important, Julie, for you guys to heat watch now, even though you're not going to breed them right now?
I think that we're gonna, at least my thought process is like that we're watching to see who's coming into heat now. So that way, when we do go to sync them up again and actually look for breeding signs of breeding, we know which ones that, you know, we didn't see cycle the first time. So to pay closer attention to them, because they could have had a heat during the night, or they could have had like, you know, silent heat and not been fully standing. So it's just important to know which ones, you know, maybe quite aren't at the point of puberty.
Yep, exactly. So anything that cycles over the next couple of days has gone through the pubertal process, right? And so she's officially entered the cyclicity portion of her life, which she's going to remain in hopefully the rest of her life. And so if we can verify that, then when we move to breeding in 2 weeks, we have a really good idea of which females are puberal and which ones are not. And so if we don't see any heat action out of those females, then we can watch them a little bit more closely. And if they don't ever come into heat, then and they don't get bred by the bull, then chances are we're going to cull them at a later date because they didn't come into puberty, they aren't contributing to the fertility of the herd. So that's where we're at right now with the heifers. And so in about another 10 days to 2 weeks, right, Julie, you guys are going to give an injection of what hormone?
Well, we're going to give them a shot of lute, and
Lutelyse is the brand name for what hormone?
the PG hormone, right?
Yep, PGF2 alpha. Yep.
Yeah.
You got it. And so what that will do is it will actually lyse the CL that's on the ovary, kill the CL. That drops progesterone and allows the follicle on the ovary to become the dominant structure on the ovary. And that female will come into heat again. And 12 hours after they're observed in standing heat, they will be artificially inseminated. So the pubertal process and the first cycle of these heifers is a really key part to our management strategy and our management calendar. We take it very seriously and we try to manage it because the data continues to show that females that get bred earlier in the breeding season, like on their first or second cycle after the pubertal transition, calve first, they have longer to recover before getting bred with their second calf by about a heat cycle. And those females continue to stay in the herd longer over their lifetime. So if you can get them bred earlier, they will have a higher chance of staying in your herd for a longer amount of time. So cool. Any questions about that? Awesome. Thanks, Julie, for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Sweet. Okay, guys. Well, we are gonna just transition really quickly here to what is coming up this week. We are officially in week 8. And we're gonna continue to kind of work through the female side of stuff. And so let me just get to our Blackboard page. All right, so on this, under the Start Here module, we're gonna again be in week 8. And this week is all about chapter 7. So week 8, chapter 7, not confusing at all. And so this is where we lay out an overview of cyclicity in the female. And so we're going to talk about anestrus. So the whole process of a female not even being or not even cycling, which puberty can be a part of that anestrus process, or anestrus can occur because of other things too. And so that's highlighted in this lecture. And then we start talking about the estrus cycle and an overview of the estrus cycle. So talking about the follicular phase versus the luteal phase. And then in chapters 8 and 9, we'll go into more depth about each one of those respectively. And so this week you've got 2 videos to work through. You've got a note guide that's available to you, and then you've got a quiz. Let me get rid of that. Delete. And then you've got a quiz that is due by end of day this Friday, March 26th. So, all right. And I would just like to reiterate, I don't want you guys to forget about the semester project, which is due April 30th by end of day. You're going to submit it in the semester project module here. If you are looking for a more in-depth breakdown of the semester project, I encourage you to review the Zoom session from week 7. So 2 weeks ago today, we spent most of our time talking through the assignment, the different scenarios that you could choose, etc., and what the expectations of that assignment are. And so you can find that written out in pretty good detail underneath the semester project assignment link here. I also threw in some example business plans. They aren't exactly what I'm looking for. They're just to give you an idea of what you could do. And these are from a beef class. So anyway, so these, just don't forget about the semester project, okay? Because that date is coming up in about 5 weeks. So it's coming up fast. All right, cool. Well, I will hang out for a few more minutes. If you guys have questions and want to talk about anything, I would love to do that with you. And if not, I will see you in a week. So don't forget about the quiz that is due on Friday. All right, guys, have a good week.
Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just had a couple questions, Dr. Diatley.
Yeah, go ahead.
I worked on getting like some research for the repro project this weekend, and I feel like I slightly may have like an advantage because I have a few friends who work at like the 808 breeding farm in Acampo, and then also a few like mentors who own stallions and breed to their own mares in Dixon. So, and her name's Jolinda, and so I talked to her mostly, and then I talked to my friend that works at like the stallion station. And so they said like, because I gave them kind of like the background, I just wanted to know like what my realistic options were. And they told me like realistically,